So let's say you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent 80. Let's see, happy first contact day. On this day in like 80 years or something, Zephyr Cochrane will make first contact with the Vulcans, ushering humanity into its interstellar role, eventually culminating in the United Federation of Planets. So there you go, that's today. April 5th, like 2140, or I don't know. I don't actually know the year.
I should know the year, and I don't.
Yeah, but that's okay. So we are here for Kent with Bent. We are continuing to look at his CSE 201 Class 6, which is Kent Hovind's second quote-unquote semester worth of deep dives into creation science evangelism, which is basically Kent Hovind opening up his brain and just letting all of the content spill out over the course of like 40 or something hours. I don't even know. It's ridiculous.
A long time, yeah.
So if you're a very, very close viewer of the channel, sorry about Friday. That was a bit of a spoof stream. If you're not sure what we're talking about, then go check out Kent with Ben Friday edition. And
I'm not sorry.
Yeah, well,
I'm not sorry about it.
so we are here actually though for the real Kent with Bent, where we speak English and where we actually go through more than like 3 seconds worth of Kent Hovind. So there's that. Anyway, we have we do have a drinking game for this. And first, I have to say that you do not have to participate, and if you do not have to drink alcohol. I do. You don't have to. But
I don't.
Yeah. But the rules are, first, we take a drink whenever Kent Hovind says something so stupid, we just kind of have to. You know, it's to let your brain not melt from all the stupid. We also take a drink whenever Kent Hovind gets something right that he's not just quoting. So if it's just a quotation, doesn't count. But if he legitimately gets a point of fact right, we take a drink. We tend to get fairly generous with those as the evening wears on, because it is by far our least common drink trigger. Next up, we have that we drink whenever Kent Hovind tells a story that didn't happen, or tells a joke that doesn't land, or whenever he mentions the National Socialist German Workers' Party, prominent members thereof, leaders, what they were getting up to in, you know, like the 20s and 30s and whatnot. Anytime he does any of that, we take a drink. Also, we have some special semi-random things, like whenever Godzilla stops by, we'll take a drink for that. That also, oh, there it is. Take a drink for Godzilla, first drink of the night.
I'm out. I lost the stream again in Discord.
In Discord, huh?
This has been a problem.
Well, let me know if you can hear it.
It's completely disconnected.
Oh, it's completely disconnected, huh?
It just cuts it off.
You might have to reconnect to the call.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, buddy, we're having some technical difficulties. We'll see what's up.
Hey, it worked.
Hey, there you go. So, where was I? I just lost my place. Oh, right, Godzilla. Now, also, there are a couple of options for how you guys can make us drink, but because, that's a dangerous power to hand to someone, it is not free. So, if you're a channel member, that means you have access to all of the Mothra, Godzilla, and, King Ghidorah emojis, and if you have a super chat as a member, and you include that anywhere in your super chat, we'll take a drink for it. Also, anyone who super chats anything to the effect that AIG are a bag of dicks will in fact cause us to drink. The trick is you do have to be careful because YouTube likes to censor that as is. So you have to, you know, come up with relatively clever workarounds, and that's for any value, and we will take a drink. And that is, yeah, like I said, if I made it free, you guys would just try to kill me with alcohol. So we're not making it free. But it is fairly cheap. I think you can get away with $2. You can get us to drink. Did I miss any, Bent? Oh, predictions.
Did you talk about Godwin's Law?
Yep. Oh, Science Side Up just joined the channel at the tetrapod level. Thank you, Science Side Up. By the way, guys, Science Side Up and I and Bent all play D&D on Cheshire Vic's channel every other Wednesday. Not this Wednesday, but next one. should be our next episode. I think we're going to go off and find some druids out in the middle of the woods. So, thank you very much, Science Side Up. Yeah, predictions. If one of us thinks that we know what Kent's argument's going to be, and we call it, and then we're right, we take a drink for that. I think that's it. Yeah. If I think of any that we missed, I'll let you know. But anyway, when last we left off, Kent Hovind was telling us to go to Bill Sardi's website. Don't ever do that. First of all, Bill Sardi is an anti-vaxxer who died of COVID like a month ago. Actually, it was probably more like 3 months ago. But now, okay, do I know for certain he died of COVID? No. But I'll say this. He did die in a hospital on a ventilator during a pandemic, and he wasn't vaccinated for COVID. So, you know, you put 2 and 2 together, you get a number that's pretty close to 4, right? Yeah, probably died of COVID. So don't take any health or life advice from the late Bill Sardi, who, by the way, also was pushing MLM supplements and vitamins. So, yeah. All right. Let's go and have some Kent in here because we're almost 10 minutes in and we haven't actually heard from Kent.
Some of these viruses are deliberately being injected to lower the population.
Okay, well, take a drink because that was immediately dumb. Okay, so here's the thing about the viruses, right? They all have natural-seeming genomes. What do I mean by that? Well, they all can be traced back to other known viral genomes, or they can be put into an easy phylogeny with other viruses. And they don't show any large amount of, like, excessive mutation. So one of the ways that you could tell if something were, like, say, genetically modified would be if it had just a whole bunch of de novo, like a bunch of de novo genes, or it had a wildly crazy phylogenetic replacement rate compared to other viruses. Also, I want to say, Lloydie for 500 yen says AAG is Dickie's bag, and you know what? That's good enough. I will take a drink. Thank you very much, Lloydie. Okay. Oh, by the way, Science Side Up, remind me to get you the link to the Discord. Although I do think it's my community tab, just, you know, still shoot me a message. Another thing could be that if you have trouble actually getting coalescence, so you get a whole bunch of polytomies because there's just a wildly odd amount of change in the genome with its nearest relatives, and we don't tend to get this with viruses. Now, we do get crazy polytomies if you try to do a very large swath of viral genetics, and that's because viruses probably don't share a common ancestor with each other as viruses, right? So modern viral lineages do not all share a common ancestor, which itself was a virus, which means that virus is not a clade, right? And so if you try to do a virus-wide phylogenetic analysis, at the base, you're just going to get an unresolvable polytomy. Or your program that you're using to run the analysis will just spit back no valid trees. So you're going to have to put the sensitivity low enough so that it'll kick back basically any tree, no matter how bad. There's that too. Because normally when you're doing phylogenetic analysis, the computer programs you're running have a threshold below which, like in terms of like plausibility or likelihood, it just won't spit back that tree. So, you know, if you send it to 0, you're basically just going to get a bunch of mutually contradictory trees or just a bunch of polytomies in the case of viruses. Anyway, that's way too much about viruses and genetics. Yeah, there's no evidence that the viruses are being injected into people. First, they don't seem artificially created. And second, injected via what? Like, what injection is it that people are getting? And then statistically getting higher rates of diseases? Because the only injections people are regularly getting are things like hormone treatments, vaccines. I can't actually think of too much else that people are regularly getting injected. I guess insulin for some diabetics.
Flu shot would be the thing I'd think of.
That's a vaccination, though.
I know, but
oh, I just already said vaccinations. So yeah, we don't see measurable increases in the rate of, you know, sickness from these. So not only is there no evidence that it is the case that people are being intentionally injected with these viruses, there's evidence against it that precludes the idea. Plus, the human population just isn't declining. So if this is some kind of population control, because, you know, this is Kent going on about crazy conspiracy theories, or they're doing a really bad job of it because there just keep being more and more people. So
They're about to try a lot harder, I guess.
yeah, those lizard people are really bad at their jobs.
There's a great book I read a few months ago called Seeds of Deception, Genetically Engineered Foods.
Oh,
Monsanto Corporation, including right here in Pensacola. Are they still in operation here in Pensacola? Monsanto?
who knows?
A big company for years, as far as I know they are.
Yeah, they're still a big company. Good job. We'll take a drink for Kent being right because I'm feeling generous and I am also kind of thirsty.
And many other companies, but primarily Monsanto,
Oh,
has tried to corner the market on food production with genetically modified foods.
no. What they've done is develop a very effective herbicide, which works by disrupting photosynthesis, so the plants that it's sprayed on can no longer photosynthesize, which is really bad for a plant. But what they've done is then genetically modified certain crops, especially, I believe, corn, to be able to withstand it. It's called Roundup Ready. So what happens is you spray Roundup, because they have a genetic resistance to Roundup, they continue photosynthesizing, but because none of the weeds do, they just die. But here's the thing. Neither Roundup nor GM crops have been found to actually have any negative health effects on humans or human analogs. And for 200 yen, Lloydie says beta ferron shots for MS. Okay, that is another one. And I mean, I feel like I would have heard if those were correlated with higher increases of, viral infection, but I don't actually know. So maybe that's where you can look for the next big viral outbreak is in MS patients. But the thing is, look, I'm not going to sit here and say Monsanto's a great company, right? I mean, they do all sorts of corrupt, shady stuff with regulators and things like that. But they're not poisoning you. They're just not. There are hundreds of studies on the safety of both Roundup Ready and Roundup, like Roundup Ready crops and Roundup. There just is no significant risk. Now, do I suggest you go down a bottle of Roundup? No, of course not. Because it's not food. But the research says that that's far less dangerous than most of the other chemicals that you might have lying around. Oh, Space Dragon asked, what do we mean by human analogs in this case? So usually rodents, and then sometimes primates. I do know of a lot of rodent studies on Roundup. I don't know of too many primate studies outside of looking at statistical changes in human populations and things like cancer rates and whatnot. But I do know that they tested extensively on rats. And rats are usually a pretty good human analog for a few reasons. One, they're easy to keep and breed, so it's easy to get a good lab population going. It's easy to feed them, care for them. But also, because they are euarchontoglires, they're actually relatively close to humans. Genetically speaking, rats they're basically the next best thing to primates, is rodents in general. So that's why they're often used as model organisms for like medical trials and things like that. Because if it works on a rat, there's a pretty good chance it works on a human, and if it doesn't work on a rat, there's a pretty good chance it won't work on a human. So, yeah, there you go. All right, here we go.
Now, they've been banned in Europe, but 70%.
No, GMOs have not been banned in Europe. I'm taking a drink. That was a meme that was floating around. I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, it was never true.
Of the foods eaten by U.S. consumers that are processed foods, okay, contain genetically modified.
Okay.
Go to Taco Bell, you get their tortilla, which has corn, which is genetically modified.
That's almost certainly true. I'll take a drink. Most of the food that you're going to get in like the industrialized development worlds are probably going to be grown as GM crops because they're more efficient. The thing is, if it weren't for GM crops, there would be more starvation. GM crops are directly opposed to the thing Kent says that the them are doing, right? Which is, depopulation. GM crops are the reason there can be so many people. And hey, Ghost Dog. Nice to see you in chat.
What do? Well, they take the gene code and they modify. Here's what the goal is.
Okay.
To get the seed to already have the pesticide built in.
Okay, take a drink. There are some GM crops that have insecticides built in. But Kent was just talking about Monsanto. Their signature GM line is Roundup Ready. which does nothing to insects. Instead, they are resistant to an herbicide. So Kent doesn't know which GM crops he's talking about, and apparently he just thinks that all of them contain insecticides. But also, here's a fun fact. You know what caffeine is for? Why plants make it? Bent, do you know?
So that I could drink coffee.
No, as it turns out, that is not the case.
Dang it.
Any other ideas?
Not for me.
All right. It turns out it's actually an insecticide. You eat plants that have ingrown pesticides, or not ingrown, but built-in pesticides all the time. Anytime you ever have caffeine, unless it was artificially, synthesized in a lab, which, by the way, isn't less safe. It's just the same molecule. But yeah, if it's plant-derived, which most is because that's relatively cheap, yeah, you've eaten a pesticide or you consumed a pesticide. So the thing is, just based on the fact that most people are familiar with the idea that you shouldn't give dogs caffeine or chocolate, you know that some things are toxic to some animals and not to others. That's the same thing with insecticides. Many insecticides are completely, insanely toxic to insects and have no effects on humans or even slightly beneficial effects on humans. It's almost like different organisms have different biochemistry.
To the gene code. So as it grows, the animals won't eat it. So in Europe, as they started doing this genetically modified food, people started noticing the butterflies are dying off. The butterfly goes to suck the juice out of the flower like he's done all of his life, and all of a sudden he croaks.
So this was a thing that was a suspected thing back in the late 2000s. I'm not really sure about the timeline there. And there was an investigation to see whether or not it was actually connected to GM crops. And at first it seemed like there might be, because in areas with a lot of GM crops, there were in fact fewer butterflies. So there did seem to be something to it. But when you dug deeper, what it turned out to be was agriculture tends to grow monocultures, and butterflies tend to depend on native biodiversity. So increasing the amount of land in a given area dedicated to agriculture decreases the amount of area that has native flora, thereby decreasing the amount of butterflies. And the reason that this was able to be teased out was because areas that had similar amounts of agriculture, but that were using a lower percentage or even no GM crops, showed similar levels in drops of butterfly numbers. So the problem is with farming. So I guess we could just say stop farming. That would solve the problem. By the way, I'm seeing at least 30 people who haven't hit like on this stream. And please do hit like, it really does help a lot.
And so to save the butterflies, they banned the genetically modified food.
No, they didn't. They found out it wasn't the GM food.
Now the fact that it kills people, oh well,
It doesn't.
Here's an article from this
Okay, look, there's no evidence it does, right?
page from this book, Seeds of Deception, which we sell, by the way, in our bookstore. It's not a Christian book, but...
I'm sorry. I'm going to drink because it's not a Christian book. It's such a weird thing to say to me. Like, you're talking about food safety. I can't imagine what Jesus has to do with food safety that you would need to write a specifically Christian food safety book.
Right?
I just don't get it. Like,
Because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because if someone who's not a Christian writes it, you can't trust them because they're not a Christian. I think it's that.
No, I agree with you. I think that is what it
But
is.
like, it's
Which is
this
weird.
mentality of like, yeah, I have to trust someone because they said they're a Christian, as opposed to I have to trust someone because they have credibility. Because that it might be the case, but credibility, Christians can lie too, just like non-Christians. Shocking, I know. So go with credibility first.
Oh, and by the way, David Wood points out another thing, which was that increased use of Roundup also helped destroy milkweed, which in some areas decreased the population of monarch butterflies, which is also the case. Which again means it's not the GM crops, it's the herbicide. And guess what? Herbicide kills plants. That's kind of the point. So thank you for the extra detail is the phrase I'm looking for. Sorry, Ben. But also, I have to point out, non-Christians want to not die from the food that they eat too.
What?
Yeah, it's like, It's like it's not like there's Christians who care about what they eat, and then non-Christians who just don't care if they eat poison.
They don't care. Yeah.
Like that's such a weird. I don't get it. The non-Christian
Because
book
they're
quote.
so lost. That's why.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to the whole like, if most of the reasons or most of the things that people say are part of the big conspiracy to depopulate the Earth, we're actually doing that. It's not clear how the quote-unquote elites would have escaped this. Like, oh, they're poisoning the air with chemtrails. It's like, I'm sorry, do the billionaires breathe different air? Is it Spaceballs where they have a can of Perry air and they pop it open and, oh, that's good air? Like, I don't think so, but I don't know. Look, if you're a millionaire and you're watching this, 1, join the Patreon, please. And 2, tell me, do you have your own separate air supply? Here we go.
In May 2003, President Bush proposed.
Sunflower says glyphosate was reclassified in 2015 as probably carcinogenic under Group 2A by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. Yes, it was. That study was absolute garbage. It was bad. It just was. I don't have the time to go into the whole thing. I would suggest checking out the Miles Power series on that. He did a very deep dive into all of it. That's if you want a YouTube source. Yeah. The probable carcinogenic, by the standards that they used, you could not find any substance to not be probably carcinogenic. You could just find either definitely carcinogenic or probably carcinogenic as the only options there. Yeah, it was a bad study.
An initiative to end hunger in Africa using genetically modified foods. He also blamed Europe's unfounded, unscientific fears of these foods for hindering efforts to end hunger. Bush was convinced that GM food, genetically modified, held the key to greater yields, expanded U.S. export.
Hang on a second. Am I witnessing strong evidence that Kent can actually read?
Oh, yeah, because we've been assuming that he's been basically functionally illiterate. Interesting.
Is he? Because I'm kind of zoning out a bit while listening. I'm not really reading along. Has he been accurate? I feel like he's been hitting these words accurately.
Yeah, I don't know. So in case you're relatively new around here, we've been speculating based on a lot of what I think is pretty decent evidence that Kent is more or less functionally illiterate. But this is actually some pretty strong counter.
To that evidence.
Oh, fair enough.
I'm not going to make it a rule or anything, but
look, the drinking rules are more like suggestions. And Arachemian with no message for $20 sends a super chat. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Guys, it really does help. I haven't said it yet, but we are doing a Patreon drive. And the reason is because currently the channel is just on the cusp of going into profitable territory. And I really wanted to get there because that basically means that the channel is self-sustaining. And I no longer am spending through my money to keep the channel alive, which would be amazing. I would love for that to be the case. So every super chat, every channel membership, every time someone joins the Patreon, heck, every time you buy a Dapper Dino t-shirt or a mug, which
every like, every share, every retweet,
those help too.
Every lurker, everything helps.
Yep.
Even one lurker is going to raise that view count by 1, and it's going to show up on someone else's recommended list now, and then they're going to become a fan, and every bit helps.
So once again, thank you everybody. But do hit like, because that also helps. All right, here we go.
And a better world. His rhetoric is not new. It's been passed down from president to president and delivered to the American people through regular news reports and industry advertisements. The message was part of a master plan that has been crafted by corporations determined to control the world's food supply. Keep in mind, love of money, root of all evil. This was made clear in a biotech industry conference in '99, where a representative from Arthur Andersen Consulting Group explained how his company had helped Monsanto create that plan. First, they asked Monsanto what their ideal future looked like in 15 to 20 years. Monsanto executives described a world with 100% of all commercial seeds genetically modified and patented.
Okay, so there's a few things. One, of course, if you ask a company that makes a product what their ideal world looks like, it looks like everyone using their product. You think if you asked like the board at Apple, what their ideal world looks like in 20 years, and they wouldn't say everyone using only Apple devices for their computing. Like okay, you ask Games Workshop, what does the ideal world look like in 20 years? Oh, no one ever buys any miniatures except your miniatures? Okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like, Random House, what does your ideal future look like in 20 years? Oh, no one reads books except for Random House books? Okay, yeah, I guess that checks out. It's just taking a drink because it's such a stupid thing to ask a company. Of course they're going to say, everyone using our stuff.
Especially if they believe that their product or service or whatever is making the world better.
Which
Monsanto
I probably does.
Monsanto thinks they do, or at least has a decent claim to think they do.
And they're probably right.
You know, I've never really looked at... Every time I've heard Monsanto, I'm like, I just don't care to decide if I want to hate them or not. I don't care.
Look,
There's enough things I can hate.
I dislike Monsanto in the same way that I dislike most gigantic multinational corporations, in the sense that they definitely have undue influence over legislatures. They are a source of corruption in the government overall. But Monsanto isn't special. They're not like the special extra evil version of what's wrong with big multinational corporations in general. Lloyd, for 500 yen, says, love of money is the root of evil, says the tax evader. You know what? It's not one of the drink triggers, but I'm going to take a drink because that's excellent and true.
He also, he did say, don't forget that. Remember. So we're going to keep that in our mind.
Yeah, so in case people don't remember, Kent Hovind tried to claim that all of his money was God's. Of course, he didn't ask God for permission to spend it, but, and that therefore he didn't owe taxes on it, and that's why he never filed an income tax return, because he didn't have any income, because none of it was his money. So if you are basically in sole control of a pile of money, claiming that it's God's is not really going to help you in the eyes of the IRS. So, Scott,
unless you happen to be God.
Well, yeah. You know what,
then
though?
You probably don't worry about the IRS.
People have tried to get God to appear in court in various lawsuits and whatnot, and they've spectacularly failed. So.
What?
Yeah, no, it's happened. Scott Duke for $4.99 says, after the week I had last week, it's a joy to settle in for some Kent with Bent with you guys. Well, you know what? I'm glad you're here. I'm sorry that last week was a rough one. My goodness. It was a rough one for me, too. So...
Same.
Yeah. I'm glad that everyone's here, because, you know what? I love my audience. You guys are all amazing. But here we go.
Love of money. Got to get a patent. Anderson then worked...
Oh, yeah, I was going to talk about patents. Yeah, patenting living organisms is weird, and there's a whole bunch of ethical and, legal weirdness associated with it. So, yeah, it's... I don't have the time or the knowledge or the inclination to get into a big whole thing here. But yeah, do know that there's a whole bunch of weird stuff with the idea of patenting living things. Horseflesh for 99 cents sends a popcorn super sticker. I actually just had popcorn before we went on. I was really hungry, and I was like, you know what? Let's make popcorn. So I had some, original butter Kroger brand instant popcorn.
Nice.
Yeah.
The good stuff.
The good stuff, yeah. Nothing but the best for this dinosaur.
Yeah.
Backward from that goal and developed the strategy and tactics to achieve it. They presented Monsanto with the steps and procedures needed to obtain a place of industry dominance in a world in which natural seeds were virtually extinct. Now think about it. For centuries, for all of human history, the farmer plants his corn, harvests the field, saves back part of his corn for seed for next year, right? Mm-hmm. That's normal. If you eat it all, now what are you going to plant next year? So there have been some companies whose full-time business is creating what's called seed corn. I grew up in the middle of...
No, seed corn is just corn that you're going to plant. All corn that you buy from a company is seed corn, but also any corn that is fertile that you save is also seed corn. No one has to develop seed corn. That's just corn you didn't eat. I'm going to take a drink because Kent Hovind apparently doesn't know what seed corn is. I think he's about to talk about Terminator seeds, and if that is what he's going to talk about, we're going to take a drink for that too.
Illinois, middle of corn country, seed corn is grown over there. So there are
seed corn is grown all over there. Yes, because all corn that grows grew from seed corn. Sorry, it's just... I don't understand how it is that Kent Hovind can know so little about farming and then pontificate about it. But then again, he is the guy who calls himself Dr. Dino, but when I asked him what a dinosaur was, he'd never thought to look into that.
It was an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, it probably was.
Companies that all they do is plant, thousands of acres of corn, not to eat, but for seed, for the next year's corn. So the farmer harvests his field, sells all his corn, goes and buys his seed for the next year.
Why?
That way, because when you get hybrid corn, or hybrid anything, with the first generation you get your ultimate results. After that, it begins to go downhill again.
Okay, that's not entirely true, right? So it depends on how far the cross is. Now, some hybrid plants, that is the case. For instance, seedless watermelons. You have to hybridize different strains of watermelon together to get the seeds that will grow the seedless watermelons. Because while seedless watermelons aren't technically seedless, the seeds that they do produce are tiny and cannot germinate. But as far as I know, that's not the case with any hybrid corn varieties, because the thing that you eat in the corn is the seed, right? Like a corn kernel is a corn seed. So I don't know how you would make a hybrid corn that doesn't make seeds and then eat it. Or are you just going to eat the corn cob? Like, what are you going to eat? So as far as I know,
I'm just going to eat the corn. That's it.
Well, so unless you're crossing like basically different species of corn, which as far as I know, there is only one cultivated species of corn, I don't see how hybrid corn is going to be infertile. But then again, I'm not an expert on corn. So if any of you do know, please let me know, because maybe I'm way off on this, but just like, first blush, this does not seem like a thing that is real that Kent is talking about, at least in terms of corn. Although I do think that it's probably the case, or it's not ridiculous to have the idea that there might be a farm whose entire purpose is to produce corn for sale as seed corn.
You crossbreed, two special dogs and you get the super dog, but then after that it reverts back toward a mutt, within a few generations.
Not if you keep that populate. Like, look, if you had, like, what's one of the more popular, like, crossbreed things, Bent? Like a Labradoodle.
Oh.
That's a thing, right?
I was going to say a liger, but sure.
Well, I meant of dogs.
Yeah, no, it's fair. Labradoodle.
So if you continue to breed Labradoodles, you could actually get a stable population of Labradoodles that all have about the same traits, and then continue that down. Like, that's a thing you could do. It's gonna be sort of like the Mexican hairless dogs, where because of the way the genetics works, you're gonna get some of the puppies that are gonna be more like poodles and more like Labradors and less like the Gen 1 Labradoodle cross. But you're still gonna get a bunch of the actual animals that are like the Gen 1 Labradoodle cross. And there you go. You just keep breeding those. I mean, look, people don't think that the Mexican hairless dog doesn't count as a breed because some of them have hair.
So the farmers have learned, hey, let's just buy seed corn, which is, the first generation's always bigger, better, and we get more money, basically. More bushels, therefore, all goes back to love of money.
How dare people sell other people corn that they would prefer, is basically what Kent's saying. I'm just going to take a drink because, Kent, there's literally nothing wrong with trying to get the most bang for your buck out of the corn that you buy.
I'm going to guess, like, the average person doing that probably has credit card debt and, like, more debt than assets maybe, or I don't know how actually all that works, but they're probably not just rolling in the billions of, what is it, $500 billion that they're trying to sue someone, government for? Wait, what was that?
Oh, no, it was Kent was trying to sell the government for $500 million.
Was it million or billion? I don't know.
It was 500 million. It was $500 million. It wasn't quite 500. It was like 400 something or other million.
May as well make it billion. Why not?
Yeah, and Lorraine Drosophila points out, or a love of feeding 8 billion people. Yeah, imagine that. It might be a little bit more complicated to feed 8 billion people than just having a family farm where you keep back some of the corn that you grew as seed corn. The global food distribution network and a global economy for food might be a little bit more complicated than that. I'm sorry that it offends Kent Hovind's agrarian sensibilities. Kent Hovind, who, as far as I can tell, has never set foot on a farm. which I have, by the way. I didn't do a whole lot of farming, but I did a little bit.
I would assume he's probably been to a farm and walked around on it.
There's no evidence of it.
That's true. I mean, I did that a lot as a kid.
I did not do it a lot. I have done it, though.
I don't know if I should say a lot, but
Actually, I don't know. If orchards count as farms, then I have done it a lot. Do they count as farms?
I went to a friend's place. I don't even know where
Here's
we
what we're
were.
gonna do.
It was like his uncle. They had a farm. We were walking around
Is
between
an
the corn.
orchard a farm? Yes or no? That's a poll now. There's very little reason for me to ask that question other than to have me know whether or not I've been to farms more often than I think. Here we go.
Well, not only is Monsanto working to get seeds that only they sell.
No, they're already doing that. Only they sell Roundup Ready seeds.
And therefore, everybody has to come to them, which is called a monopoly.
Okay, no. We're going to take a drink because now Kent doesn't know what a monopoly is.
You know, I remember buying this compact disc from this band, and it was weird because no other bands could sell that CD.
Exactly. So the thing is, monopolies have to be defined in terms of what the market is. And so the problem there is that it's always arbitrary. So does Metallica have a monopoly? Well, they do on Metallica albums, I guess. But like, what if you like Slayer? Then you buy Slayer albums, and the monopoly that, Metallica has on their albums doesn't mean anything to you. What if Kellogg's was the only breakfast cereal in town? Only company that made breakfast cereal. Okay, but I like eggs and bacon. So are they competing with eggs and bacon, or do they have a monopoly?
They should make an eggs and bacon Kellogg's cereal. I wouldn't eat it, but some people might.
I don't think I would eat that. That sounds horrible.
With milk? Yeah.
But anyway, so one of the things there is, okay, Monsanto has a monopoly on Roundup Ready corn, but they don't have a monopoly on corn. So, what do they have a monopoly? I guess if you define it narrowly enough, but not if you define it in a way that makes much more sense, which is to say, like, corn in general. So, yeah, and that's actually, to be fair, one of the more complicated things about, like, economics and whatnot is where do you call it a monopoly? Like, how broad of a category? Because ultimately, all goods compete with all other goods. To some extent. Like, if you buy, if you spend all your money on great food, well, you're not spending it on a new, like, fancy hat. So, are restaurants competing with haberdashers? Kinda, yeah, to some extent. So, yeah, that's one of the more complicated things about economics is whether or not there's a monopoly is always to some degree arbitrary. Anyway, here we go.
Which means, guess what they're going to do? When they've got the only seeds that'll grow, you raise the price. Everybody gets rich. Love of money, root of all evil.
Fun thing about monopolies, if you raise the price much over market clearing, it invites new entrants to the market, and unless those entrants are prevented from joining the market, tend to lose the monopoly over time. So if Monsanto suddenly managed to be the only people who were selling corn seeds, like, commercially, and they were selling them for exorbitant prices, anyone who just happens to have some heirloom corn could come in, vastly undercut them, and suddenly Monsanto doesn't have a monopoly anymore. That's it. That's over. Monopolies are just not stable. The only time they are stable is when they are state mandated, which is why mercantilism was such a really bad idea, which was basically just various countries mandating monopolies for almost everything.
My monopolies were stable. The key is to go in for the kill, and then you win the game, and then but if you let them stay around too long, eventually you'll go to jail too much, and then your opponents will start collecting more money, and then now you lose your monopolies, and then it's over.
Well, you just gotta get a bunch of hotels.
I'm not actually giving my real secrets away on how to win a monopoly.
Okay.
Part of the plan is chemtrails.
Oh my goodness, take a drink for chemtrail. My goodness. No one has yet to show a reason why supposed chemtrails aren't just contrails. But let's have Kent Hovind tell us about chemtrails, because apparently there is no conspiracy theory that he won't believe.
Except for flat Earth.
That's true, but it wasn't popular at this time. Like, if it had been popular at this time, I think we might have a different Kent Hovind. So I think the only reason Kent Hovind isn't a flat earther is because when it rose to popularity, he was in prison. So he missed it.
Maybe.
Go to chemtrails911.com. Chemtrails stands for chemical trails.
And what's the 911 for? Oh my goodness.
So
I have to go to this website.
We might not be monetized anymore. My goodness.
The goal is to spray the earth with aluminum oxide, I believe, is the primary thing.
Okay, so that's a common talking point among chemtrail type people.
Hold on, did he say carbon monoxide?
No, he said aluminum oxide.
Okay.
Carbon monoxide would be more accurate. Because, planes run on diesel and that does emit some carbon monoxide. So, if they were yeah, that would be the better option. But anyway, so here's the thing about aluminum oxide. If it were true that planes were spraying aluminum oxide, you could detect higher amounts of aluminum oxide when they're spraying or in the hours or days after. But no one does. So that's it. Find the higher amounts of aluminum oxide, or you're just wrong. Those are the options. Turns out they're wrong.
This makes the soil such that basically the genetically modified foods are the best ones to grow in it.
No, it doesn't. Taking a drink. All right. Aluminum is one of the most common metals on the surface of the Earth. There's already plenty of aluminum oxide all over, and there are no GMOs that are specifically set up to be resistant to aluminum oxide. The reason that
tardigrades, so those aren't GMOs though.
Well, the reason that some people say that aluminum oxide is sprayed in the air, and these are people who are actually better at chemtrail conspiracies than Kent is that aluminum oxide has a very high albedo. That means that it reflects a large proportion of light that hits it. And the idea is that the quote-unquote chemtrails are a global warming mitigation, because if more sunlight gets reflected away from Earth, less of it stays on Earth, heating the Earth up. That's actually true. If we were to just carpet the sunny side of the planet with aluminum oxide clouds, yeah, that would go towards mitigating climate change. It's true.
So does Uncle Kent, no relation, want climate change to happen? I mean, I don't think he believes in it, but
I don't actually know.
Because I feel like that's a stretch, but he might, based on what you're saying.
But yeah, so Kent isn't even getting the chemtrail conspiracy right, which is just amazing.
Spending bazillions of dollars spraying the atmosphere.
Olivia Williams for $6.99 Beaver Bucks says, well, to deal with the loss of monetization. Monetarization. Thank you very much, Olivia. We're probably far enough in that we probably won't get demonetized. But it seems like the last few Kent with Bents, I've always been like, ugh, it's suddenly risky. Science says I might be thinking of sulfur dioxide. I might be, but aluminum dioxide is, if I remember correctly, one of the more common white pigments in paints. But hey, everybody, go fact check me on that, because
we used titanium dioxide.
Titanium dioxide
in what did we use it in? Oh, we used it in food. We used it in the jam factory that I used to work at. I call it the jam factory. I made thousands of pounds of fruit filling at a time.
Oh, you know what? What did it do?
Yeah, it made things whiter.
Oh, so I might be thinking of titanium dioxide.
It made things pretty white.
Oh, that's probably right. I am probably thinking of titanium dioxide in terms of the white. So, yeah, aluminum dioxide is actually pretty dark colored. So, scrap everything I said about aluminum dioxide, because I was thinking of titanium dioxide. But I also wasn't thinking of sulfur dioxide. I was thinking of titanium. Yeah, Yeah, actually, maybe that is the reason that conspiracy idiots think that they're spraying aluminum dioxide. But again, you don't find higher amounts of it. So sorry about that, everybody. Look, Kent with Bent is unscripted and off the cuff, and I get stuff wrong. Do not take this stuff at face value. Do check up on me, and do correct me whenever you find that I'm wrong. Because look, it's a drinking show, and I get stuff wrong. I get far less wrong than Kent Hovind does, though.
Don't take my medical advice. Take your doctor's.
Yeah,
advice.
No medical or legal advice here.
Yeah, not legal. No legal advice either.
My medical advice is go talk to a doctor, and my legal advice is go talk to a lawyer. Oh, and sulfur dioxide was proposed for climate mitigation? Okay. So maybe I'm thinking of both titanium and sulfur dioxide. Well, everybody, sorry. If I could, I would give you the last 5 or so minutes of your lives back. I can't.
Hey, what about the poll results?
Oh yeah. Okay, let's check those. Let's see. We've had 52 votes, which is it's close enough. If you guys wanted to vote, you would have. So let's see. We got 87% saying that yes, an orchard is a farm. So in that case, I did frequently visit farms when I was growing up because we went to a lot of orchards in the fall. Yeah. Yeah, One for Null says, I came with news of chemistry. Yeah, look, guys, chemistry is by far one of my worst sciences. So if I start waxing about chemistry and you're like, that doesn't sound right, call me out, because there's a fair chance that I'm wrong about that. Okay, here we go.
With things that are going to, of course, here's the cover story is, we're trying to reflect back some of the sunlight.
Yeah, okay, so I was wrong about which thing was. He thinks it's just a cover story, and it's sulfur dioxide that he's thinking of, because, look, aluminum dioxide would not greatly increase the albedo of the planet. It's
to be fair, it's aluminum oxide, not aluminum dioxide.
Oh, sorry.
Which is what you had been saying until titanium dioxide, and then you switched to dioxide. That's when I remember.
Like I said, I am bad at chemistry.
Well, I'm bad at it too. I had it up and I read it.
I know that chemicals exist. I remember a few formulae.
I think I remember glucose and water.
I mean, I sure don't remember the formula for glucose. I probably should, but I don't.
66H12O6.
You say so. Here we go.
All it is.
So that we don't have global warming.
It's a CH2O times 6.
Okay.
That's how I remember it.
I mean, that does make sense. But I also am chemistry bad.
And I could be wrong on that, but that's how I've always remembered it, and it got me through my chemistry courses in college. So, with an A, ever heard of it?
No.
And an AB. It's not as good as an A, but anyway.
All right, here we go.
The reality is, this stuff they're spraying out is going to electrify the soil.
What? It's going to electrify the soil? What does that even mean?
Been fun.
I'm taking it. I don't even know what that means.
It means the soil will be made of electricity.
Oh my goodness.
Or it'll be like the floor is lava, basically, but electricity instead of.
Well, that basically reminds me of what is it?
Oh my goodness.
Oh no, I can't think of it. Oh well, I lost it. I'll think of it later.
There's a good article in New American.
Borderlands. That's what it made me think of. In Borderlands, there are buckets of electricity you can shoot, and they explode into a spray of electricity. Maybe that's what aluminum oxide is. It's just a bucket of electricity.
Is he talking about lightning striking the ground?
I don't think so, because it's talking about aluminum oxide.
Yeah, but are you sure that's not actually aluminum oxide and not actually lightning? Is lightning not real? Are all birds drones?
I think lightning is real, but yes, all birds are drones. But yeah, that also reminds me of you guys know who Jungle Jargon is. He's a young Earth creationist whose big shtick is getting anthropology wrong so he can pretend that Y chromosome haplogroups match the Bible.
Let's not forget that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But also, when I told him that my phone was dying and I needed to go charge it, he was like, "Yeah, you got to put the electrons in there." And then I laughed. Turns out, no, he was serious. He thinks that the way that batteries works is that you just pour electrons into them like a bucket of electrons, and then when you use your phone, it's draining the electrons from your battery. Eric Champion says, for $20, says, and reliance on fossil fuels, electrify the soil now and harvest the free energy. Yes. Goop23 for 2 US says he forgot ground type is immune to electric type. Scott Duke for $4.99 US says, have you experienced Shakespeare in the original Klingon? Definitely off topic, but I was curious. So I have a copy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark in Klingon, as well as The Taming of the Shrew. No, not Taming of the Shrew. Much Ado About Nothing in Klingon.
Last week you had said you should consider redeeming this video for a video react on a Twitch account I was watching, and it was a scene of Hamlet, I think, in Klingon. Yep. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
It was the to be or not to be soliloquy.
Okay. I was like, I don't.
Yeah, there's
also, I wanted to comment on Jungle Jargon. Let's not forget, Jungle Jargon is the person who introduced me and you in this chat to Mr. Batman, or to who that was.
Oh, is that who that was?
That debate up. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I will not forget that, because
I have forgotten that.
If you don't know about Mr. Batman,
my goodness. Well, I would say go watch my debate with him, but like, don't.
It kind of ruins Batman and Misters.
Yeah.
And like ears and brains.
And dinosaurs.
And dinosaurs.
And birds.
But he will destroy you in a debate.
My goodness. Yeah, that was...
According to Jungle Jargon in the chat.
Yeah.
Whichever Kent with Benton when that was, I don't know.
All right, well, here we go. I forgot that was him.
Which is the John Birch Society's magazine. I'm not a member of the John Birch Society, nor am I against them. I'm very much for them, but I'm not a member of anything except,
why not?
The Lord's Kingdom
Does it cost
and my
money?
family. But they have engineered extinction.
Wait, did he
the
say
goal
something
is
about his family?
What?
Did he say something about his family?
No, I don't think so. But I do want to go back a second, because I want to read that cover.
This is the John Birch Society's magazine. I'm not a member of the John Birch Society, nor...
Okay. Engineered extinction, destroying America's resource industries. So, we're talking about the extinction of America's primary production industries. So, like, primary production of food by farming. There's logs there, so probably by logging. I don't know what's on the far right, because it's really low resolution. Maybe steel manufacture. I don't really know. So here we're talking about...
pipe, I think.
Okay. So...
Like an oil pipeline or something?
Oh, maybe it's an oil pipeline. Yeah, that could be. So anyway, but we're talking about the extinction of primary production in the United States, not of anything else. And I can almost guarantee Kent is going to say that this is evidence that someone is trying to go for extinction of humans.
Am I against them? I'm very much for them, but I'm not a member of anything except, the Lord's Kingdom and my family. But they have engineered extinction.
And my family,
the goal is
he said. But I thought he said something else.
Oh, okay.
Destroy America's resources and the world's resources. United Nations has a philosophy.
No! My goodness. Okay, that wasn't what I predicted, but I'm still taking a drink. For a reason I'll give you. It wasn't about destroying the resources themselves. It was the U.S.'s primary production industries, manufacture of primary goods, or just production of primary goods in the United States. That's not the destruction of those resources, right? Like, the United States is a fairly minor producer of sugar in the world, like cane sugar. That doesn't mean that cane sugar is gone, even though left to its own, the U.S. cane sugar industry would be gone. It's just that other places do it better. So they have a competitive advantage at making sugar versus the United States. Now, the United States does save its sugar industry by using sugar import quotas to guarantee that U.S. citizens, or residents, not citizens, residents, have to buy a significant portion of their sugar from U.S. sugar producers. That's a whole different thing. I don't want to get into it. But it was just an example of an industry that I know wouldn't be self-sustaining left to its own, is cane sugar in the United States.
What about beet sugar?
I don't know, actually. So sugar beets, they're less popular than cane sugar, but I don't know if they're easier to grow or they grow in more places in the United States. So yeah, I don't really know.
I only know of one beet farm, and that's somewhere near Scranton.
Yeah, I'm aware of that one too. But those beets aren't sugar beets. Yeah, those are just regular rolled beets.
No. Okay.
Okay.
Very simple. Food is power. We use it to control behavior. We do not apologize. They want to reduce the population by whatever means possible.
That didn't say that, Kent. That said that food is power.
Was.
Yeah. When Kent has an ellipses, he's probably, palming a card right there.
Let's take about a 5-minute break and come back and talk about more of the plans for the New World Order and what you can do about it after a few minutes. All right, let's get back to the population control.
Oh, good.
United Nations folks said food is power.
Edit.
We use it to control behavior. We do not apologize. Boy, they can sure do that too, What if a famine hits a country? They want everybody to move into the city where they can control them a little better. Well, let's just have food distribution because of the famine.
I'm sorry. Are you saying we shouldn't have food distribution during a famine, Kent? Is that your solution? I'm going to take a drink because apparently Kent Hovind is anti-giving food to starving people.
But of course, we're going to do it where we want you to come.
No, Kent, you're going to do it where it's logistically possible. There isn't the infrastructure for mass food distribution out in the middle of nowhere. Look, it would be great if it were easy to get goods to literally every location in the world in the amount needed at a moment's notice. That isn't the case. If you want to fly in food, you're going to have to fly it into an airport. And then if you want to transport food somewhere, you're going to have to actually bring it there somehow by train or overland or via helicopter. And spoiler alert, helicopters are super expensive to operate.
Then, when you finally let the food get down and you fly away, in come the guys with the guns and they're like, this is our food now.
Well, that does happen too.
I mean, it happened in that movie, so
yeah.
I'm not surprised. I don't know how realistic that was.
We go for ideal circumstances with the current infrastructure where no one is stealing the food. The government isn't hoarding it for themselves in these places. Yeah, food distribution centers are still going to be in cities because it's where they have the infrastructure to get people to and from and to actually physically distribute the food. Yeah, and Space Dragon says, yeah, wasn't Jesus famously against giving food to people? Yeah, he was actually. That was one of his big things. That's in John 46:12, where Jesus says, now, whatever you do, if people are starving, don't feed them.
That's in 3 Timothy, the 3rd book that Timothy wrote to himself.
Bit of an inside joke if you haven't been watching for a while. Kent Hovind thinks that Timothy wrote the first books of 1st and 2nd Timothy.
He pretends that they're like diary entries, I guess. I don't know.
Where Timothy calls himself Paul writing to Timothy.
And he was confused about who he was.
You come to us to get the food. Len Horowitz has a great video out. I believe it's in book form also, called Emerging Viruses. If you're in the military or you're considering having your children vaccinated or getting vaccinated yourself for anything, flu vaccine included, you better read about what's really happening.
Yeah, I agree. You should read about what's really happening. Go and check out medical studies. Check out the safety studies on various vaccines. Check out things like the statistical decline in infection rate of various infectious diseases as vaccines for those diseases are introduced. Yeah, go do that. What you shouldn't do, what you absolutely should not do, is read some book that got published by some guy without peer review that's been hawked by a guy calling himself Dr. Dino who doesn't know what a dinosaur is and whose idea of an acceptable PhD dissertation citation is KJV, get title. Don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, and spoiler alerts, for all of the approved vaccines out there, what you're going to find when you actually read the real peer-reviewed research is that all of them are safe and effective. And that, yes, there is a risk of harm, like there is with all medical procedures, but it's extremely low. And if you have an adverse reaction to a vaccine, you can be tested to see which ingredients cause the adverse reaction, and then you can note that and avoid vaccines with those ingredients or seek out alternatives that lack them. Yeah, tell your doctor.
Tell your doctor.
Yeah, what you shouldn't...
It's good for them to know if you're allergic to a vaccine.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Which is, I mean, that's a real thing, right?
It's uncommon, but it's real. People can die from them.
And what you
Don't get a vaccine if you're allergic.
Oh yeah.
And you will die. Talk to your doctor, right? Don't take my advice, but it's not like it is. Everyone must get vaccinated to get these imaginary viruses that Kent's making up or whatever. It's not about that. It's about keeping people healthy and our society healthy.
Well, at least I know now that Kent's anti-vax stuff goes back way farther than just his quote-unquote marriage to Mary Toko. Which, by the way, Mary Toko left him because she was noticing all the illegal stuff that was going on at Dinosaur Adventureland, and she tried to warn Cindy, and Cindy didn't listen, which Cindy now regrets, as, the victim that Kent was convicted of abusing. Yeah. Oh, and in case anyone's wondering, go check out Cindy Lincoln's channel. It's just Cindy Lincoln. Because Kent and some of his followers trashed one of her properties after she gave them an eviction notice because she was trying to sell the property to recoup some amount of money that she had lost by, basically just handing over tens of thousands of dollars to Kent as a trust, as a loan that he was supposed to repay, and now he just hasn't. So, yeah, that's fun stuff.
There's some pretty gross things.
Oh yeah, don't be snacking.
Behind.
Don't be snacking or eating when you do that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say what, but it might make you want to gag or something. So,
actually, you know what? We're gonna take a quick break, so we're gonna go and get the intermission scene. So we're gonna be back in just a few minutes, guys. Thank you again for everyone being here, and we got a Klingon clock with some music by Beethoven. And we will be right back after this clock. And we are back. All right. we are back from that, and I want to repeat that, hey guys, there is a Patreon drive. I'm trying to get it to 400 a month, which will probably be pretty consistently make the channel at least break even. I would say that the amount that we have to go, unfortunately, I had about $30 in declines at the beginning of the month, which is actually not that unusual. There's usually a few declines, then people get emails and they update their payment and it comes back in. So I'm not actually sure for probably another week or so whether or not those declines are actually... Oh, hey, drink from Mothra. So if I assume that all those declines do get properly processed after people get their emails and they check and update their payment information, then we will need $43 to get to the goal. So that's what I'm going to go with for now, is $43. I just had a new $5 patron today, which is awesome. Unfortunately, they're not going to be in the credit scene because they should have got in before, I think, about 5 a.m. my time today, because that's when I compiled the list for this month's credit scene. Sorry about that. But guys, it does start at only $1 a month. There's a 10% discount for going per year instead of per month. One of the first benefits you get is you get to join the Discord server that's just for patrons. I'm going to be hanging out there after the show today. We hang out there. It's easy to get a hold of me there. But there's also other stuff, like you get early access to about 2 months worth of videos that haven't released yet. At higher tiers, you get things like, being shouted out by name, verbally by me in the credits. At really high tiers, you can get access to some of my 3D assets that I use for the show. Like, you can actually get my dinosaur avatar at one of the levels. Starting at $10.
He makes himself, by the way.
Yeah. Starting at $10, you'll just get random blend files if you like 3D assets. So, yeah, do check it out. It's patreon.com/the_dapper_dinosaur. But anyway, we're going to get into more Kent because he's not really here for a commercial. It's just that since there is a drive, I do want to mention it. And yeah, if everyone here gave $1, we would more than beat that amount. So, here we go.
With vaccines. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to give any medical advice.
He's just going to tell you not to take your doctor's advice and, quote-unquote, do your own research on vaccines.
But I'm going to tell you, I would really think twice about that. Tetrahedron.org is a good website that deals with...
It sounds like advice. He thinks I should think twice about it.
Yeah, look, what does and doesn't count as medical advice? I don't know what the legal stuff is there. Like,
I guess me saying ask your doctor, that would be, you could call that medical advice. Yeah.
Or if I say,
I just want you to get it from
hey, if you just made a tea out of random flowers you found on a walk, maybe you shouldn't. Is that medical advice? I don't know. Does that count as medical advice, do you think? Anyway.
With this topic, as does BillSardi.com. Actually, I think Bill Sardi's website is actually Knowledge of Health. But if you go to BillSardi.com,
why is it at knowledgeofhealth911.com?
So I actually do think that 911 was probably for like the emergency number in the US, which is 911.
Okay, maybe.
I think that is more likely that it trying to be a connection to the September 11th. Yeah. Oh yeah, the emergency number was 911 in the United States for decades before the 9/11 attack. Anyway.
It'll trip over to his website automatically. There's another one called vaclib.org, Vaccination Liberation. Let's stop vaccinating.
I'm not going to give you medical advice. I'm just going to direct you to a whole slew of pseudoscience nonsense pages that are going to give you medical malinformation or misinformation is what I meant. Sorry, misinformation.
And then also mal.
Well, yeah, it's true. And then you're just going to get sicker than you would otherwise, most likely. Yeah, I'm going to take a drink. Medical stuff, by the way, guys, medical pseudoscience really, really angers me. It's why I don't cover it much. Yeah.
Because it's very harmful. Or, I guess...
Evidence and Reasons, which, by the way, hello, Sal. Wonderful to have you here, as always. Does Kent read crank science sites? Crank sites, because he can't actually read the real works of science? I can't say for certain, but I'm going to go ahead and say yes, definitely.
I would assume that he doesn't trust anything that's peer-reviewed because Satan's making scientists lie in it or something like that. That's probably what he
I
would
mean,
say.
he
I
does
think.
seem to imply that because Satan is the one who's tricking people into believing science, that science must somehow be of the devil, which does mean that I guess Satan is in charge of peer review. Sorry. Carrie Bronson, who's been a member for 12 months, thank you very much, Carrie Bronson, says, PSA, tetrahedron.org is an insecure connection, and my antivirus got nervous about it. That is great, and also entirely, it's surprisingly unsurprising is what that is. Like, I'm kind of shocked by how completely that seems like a thing that would happen. So, my goodness. Yeah, don't go to any website that Kent Hovind directs you to because he directed you to it. Check other people and stuff. And by the way, I haven't said in a while, but please do hit like. I am seeing some 17 or so people who haven't hit like. It really does help out the channel.
That book, these two books here, Vaccines, The Deadly Deception, and The Power of Healing, The Power of God, are available in the bookstore right next door.
Ooh, okay. So The Power of Healing, The Power of God sounds like a faith healing thing, where just trust in God for your health. And look, I'm not telling you not to pray for good health and whatnot. That's not my place. That's not what I'm here for. But my goodness, do not replace medical intervention with prayer or faith healing. That's a really bad idea. Let's assume there's a God. He gave people brains, and he gave people the ability to figure out evidence-based medicine, and then they did it. Accept that blessing. And of course, if there's no God, then my goodness, is faith healing a really bad idea.
There were 22,000 reports of hospitalizations and injuries, including 300 deaths, following hepatitis B vaccines.
How many were there before? Were they for hepatitis-related complications? How do you know? Was it just that people got those vaccines and then later on they had some kind of hospitalization incident? What was the normal amount of hospitalizations per unit time per population? I don't know. He doesn't tell us. Oh, and hey, look! It's MaryTogo.com, Kent's future ex-wife. Kent is directing you to the website of his future ex-wife. Fun stuff. Oh man, it's good to know that they were already thick as thieves back before his divorce.
I lost the date in my notes. I think it was since '96, but I may be incorrect on that. Mary Tocco, Tocco, lives in Michigan and travels and speaks on the dangers of vaccinations.
Well, that was until Kent Hovind decided to change his theology about divorce. Whereas before he was like, oh no, can't divorce. And if you do, and then you remarry and start sleeping with your new spouse, that counts as adultery. But suddenly, after Kent Hovind got divorced, he was all like, nah, that's for other people, I guess. Yeah.
A lot of people are getting, like, autism. We had a girl here at the park yesterday who was
oh my goodness, take a drink for vaccines cause autism. Okay, there's a few things. One, regardless of vaccination status, the symptoms of autism, or actually in this case usually signs of autism, start to become apparent around the same age that kids start getting a fairly large battery of vaccines. But that happens regardless of vaccination status. Second, the only paper that was ever really published that showed any kind of connection between vaccines and autism had... Oh, take a drink. Had an absurdly small sample size, couldn't be replicated, and was published by someone who wasn't saying that vaccines broadly cause autism. He was saying that specifically the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella, was causing autism. And he was developing his own competitor to the main MMR vaccine, which according to him, didn't cause autism. That man has since had his medical license revoked. That's Andrew Wakefield.
What happened to the paper?
Oh, I mean, it did get published, but it was then retracted by the journal.
It was retracted.
Yeah, not by the author, but by the journal. The journal was like,
what about all of the other papers that supported the claim?
They were never existed.
Oh, so what you're saying is all zero of the others?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Andrew Wakefield is a scumbag and a fraud, and he is the source of this claim, and it is not true. Also, even if it were true, vaccines protect your children from deadly diseases. Even if they did cause autism, great. You should rather have a kid that's alive than a kid that has. Like, you should not prefer your kid to die than for your kid to have autism.
I used to take the over-the-counter asthma medication because we were too poor to have health insurance, and it makes your heart race, and you get palpitations and stuff. But you don't die from your asthma attack, so it's worth it.
Weird. My goodness.
Yeah,
I just have trouble imagining someone who comes to the conclusion that, oh yeah, dying of measles is a worse fate than just having autism. By the way, guys, all of you probably know people who are on the autism spectrum, but who you don't know are on the autism spectrum, because a fairly high portion of people on the spectrum learn to function normally within society, even though they don't fully understand why they have to follow these various arcane rituals that they encounter with other people. Do it anyway.
I feel.
Well, maybe you have undiagnosed autism.
It would be undiagnosed if I did.
Yeah, and as Evidence and Reason says, nice to not have polio. Thank you, Jonas Salk. Yeah. An iron lung sounds like a really bad time.
11 years old and autistic. That's horrible. What that does to kids, you know, just like you're raising a baby for the rest of their life in many cases.
Okay, I'm going to take a drink. Look, there are some people with profound autism who are not going to be able to function on their own in their lives, right? Who are always going to need to be the ward of someone. And that is unfortunate. But the vast majority of people with autism spectrum disorders do okay for themselves. They manage to have friends, have careers, even have families. Autism spectrum disorders are not just like you're now sentenced to being a ward of the state for your entire life after your parents die. That's not the case. Look, are there extra challenges with raising an autistic child? Yeah, there are. It's good. A lot of things are going to be harder for them. I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. But even if it were true that vaccines cause this, still, that's way better than your kid dying, at least in my opinion. Now, granted, I don't have any kids, but, like, I have kids in my family, in my life, and I would rather have any of them be autistic than just dead of polio.
Here's Mary Toko's phone number if you want to call her, or marytoko.com. Dr. Kalakarinos said, I found the whole vaccine business was indeed a gigantic hoax.
Who is this? Where did he say this? When did he say this? Saying Dr. Kalakarinos is not a proper citation, Ken. But then again, this is the man who thought that KJV Get title was a proper citation, so what do I know?
Most doctors are convinced that they are useful. But if
yeah, convinced by the actual scientific research. Weird.
I would agree with that. Most doctors are convinced that vaccines are useful. I would think that's probably true.
It's probably true.
To that.
Well, it's just a quotation, so technically it's not a drink trigger.
Dang it.
If you look at the proper statistics and study the instances of these diseases, you will realize this is not so. You cannot immunize sick children, malnourished children, and expect to get away with it. You'll kill far more children than would have died from natural infection.
First of all, I don't like this whole immunize versus vaccine thing for other reasons that aren't related.
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, okay, here's the thing. We have the statistics. The statistics are in. It's just not true, right? Now, granted, if a kid is, like, starving and malnourished, is it probably more important that they get proper nutrition than that they get a vaccine? I mean, yeah, probably. But fortunately, in most cases, it's not an either-or thing. It's not like, oh, you either give this kid food or you vaccinate them. You can't do both. Harry Bronson for $5 says, Kent probably thinks autism is a manifestation of sin in a fallen world. He absolutely thinks that. And would probably give such a kid a heart attack with an exorcism. I don't know about the exorcism thing. I don't have any reports of Kent ever attempting any exorcisms. So
I don't think he thinks that about autism, because I think he thinks vaccines cause them.
Oh, but he still thinks it's a manifestation of sin, because he thinks that all diseases and
Is
problems.
Satan's convincing the scientists to give us autism with our vaccines
Maybe.
and our chemtrails?
I mean, maybe that is a thought, but ultimately he thinks all suffering is the result of sin.
Okay.
Science Side Up says vaccines are safer than Tylenol. Yeah. It's actually hard to think of any medical interventions that are lower risk than vaccines, at least, the actual tested and approved vaccines. Yeah, they really are one of the safest things. I've actually told people this, including one person who was debating whether or not to get her kids vaccinated. I said, look, the most dangerous part about getting a vaccine by far is the drive to the doctor's office. You're far, far more likely to have a horrible car accident than you are for any of your kids to have any adverse reactions to a vaccine. So talk to your doctor, and if they recommend the vaccines, well, then you just got your medical advice. Follow it.
By the way, Jenner is famous for developing the vaccine, right? Now you see the picture of him giving the vaccine to the little boy. The little boy died a couple years later of tuberculosis.
But not of smallpox. There
And
is
not
no
of autism?
There is no okay, look, unless I'm wrong, as far as I know, there is no tuberculosis vaccine. And I say this based on the fact that I live with someone with an active case of tuberculosis, and given that she was a healthcare worker, I feel like she would have had a tuberculosis vaccine had there been one. But I guess I don't know that for certain, so guys, double check, but as far as I know, there is no tuberculosis vaccine. And no one is claiming that a vaccine will prevent you from getting any diseases at all.
There's a BCG vaccine, not widely used in the United States, does not always protect against TB. I don't know how new it is. This is last reviewed in 2016, which would be about 10 years after.
And way before vaccines were developed. Or sorry, way after vaccines were developed.
Yeah, way after. And I can't, it's hard to remember. We talked about that a long time ago when I was in, how do you say, college? The thing that Uncle Kent didn't really go to?
He did go, I think he did go to like 2 semesters of real college, if I remember correctly.
Oh, there we go.
Mike Brooks for £5 says, I spent most of my childhood in and out of hospital. What I remember are all the polio victims. Yeah, that's not a fun thing. I'm also autistic. No MMR, obviously. Yay, measles. So, yeah, look, someone who managed to become, or well, not become, but someone who managed to be autistic without the MMR vaccine, which granted, anecdotal, but yeah, there is no correlation. And yeah, man, hospitals, polio patients, man, that's rough.
If vaccines cause autism, does that, I mean, do people who think that think all autism is caused by vaccines? So if you never get one, you can't get autism?
It varies. And also the people who tend to think that aren't usually very clear in their thinking about like causality and logical necessity, like sufficient versus necessary causes and what.
They just don't trust, yeah, okay.
Is there something in the vaccine that might have killed him? I don't know. I suspect so.
Well, unless it was tuberculosis, Kent, then no. Oh my goodness, I'm taking a drink.
It's possible.
The thing is, I don't actually know if Kent is right that
it's possible
died of tuberculosis.
When was this? Like, how long ago did this happen?
I mean, talking about like the first vaccines being developed. When was that?
So did they not use a sterile needle maybe? Maybe there was like some tuberculosis on the needle like that. That's the biggest stretch ever, but...
Yeah. And even if that were the case... Well, first of all, I do think they did sanitize the needles, although I'm not sure. But yeah, even if that were the case, it wasn't the vaccine that did it. It was contamination. Does Kent think that tuberculosis is just something that spontaneously develops? Like, and that it's not an infection?
I wonder if he could pronounce tuberculosis.
Yeah, I don't know.
Dr. Mendelsohn said, there's a growing suspicion.
Again, is this from this book, Vaccinations, or is it just... Who knows?
Suspicion that immunization against relatively harmless childhood diseases may be responsible for dramatic increase in autoimmune diseases since mass inoculations were introduced.
Well, since there isn't a dramatic increase in autoimmune diseases, that seems unlikely.
These are fearful diseases such as cancer,
Not autoimmune.
leukemia,
Also covered by cancer.
rheumatoid arthritis,
First one that's autoimmune.
multiple sclerosis,
I don't think that's autoimmune.
Lou Gehrig's disease,
Not autoimmune.
etc.
Oh, lupus, which can't covered by etc., is autoimmune. So, look, a doctor who can't figure out that cancer is an autoimmune disease isn't a doctor whose advice I would recommend taking.
There are all kinds of diseases people are getting. Many folks, including myself, are convinced they're coming largely because of the vaccinations.
Well, Kent, you have fun with not vaccinating yourself. I sincerely hope you catch a horrible preventable disease.
I just don't understand why picking the worst possible take on something seems like a reasonable thing to do.
I mean, it's Kent. That's his MO.
The thing literally invented to help prevent disease is the cause of disease. Got it. Up is down, down is up, forwards is backwards.
Ignore the actual statistics, though. Don't pay any attention to those.
You're putting poisons into your body. I taught
Nope, you're not.
biology. I understand germ theory and how it's supposed to work.
You obviously do not understand germ theory, Kent. I'm just taking a drink.
But he taught biology.
No, he didn't.
Okay? I still remain unconvinced.
I believe
willing to discuss-
you do remain unconvinced. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll drink to that.
Okay, I guess technically that's a true statement. Evidence Reason says Kent got 1/2 of a data point right on Julianne Barr, or is it Barr or Barre? I can't tell.
I don't remember.
Syndrome. I won't drink to that, given everything else that he said. Yeah, and also it's a pretty uncommon problem, which is it's much less common than measles would be without the MMR vaccine.
Right.
It with anybody. But I defy you to find anything in Scripture that would give the indication that you should put something poisonous into your body to counteract a poison.
Kent, you are the man who encourages people to eat cyanide to prevent cancer. Okay.
But the Bible doesn't say to do that.
I'm going to
He's right about that.
I'm going to take a big old drink for stupid and hypocrisy. Then I'm going to read Lloydie's super chat. And we're going to talk about eating cyanide. Okay, Lloydie for 666 yen says, multiple sclerosis is considered to be an immune-mediated disease in which the body's immune system attacks the central nervous system. Okay, then yeah, that definitely counts, at least in my book. So I'll take it. Okay. So Kent, as well as his son Eric, recommend a cancer prevention and treatment, I'm not even going to say option, quackery, sometimes known as Laetrile, and sometimes known as vitamin B17.
Oh, I thought you were going to say shenanigans.
Well, I mean, also sometimes known as shenanigans. So Laetrile is a chemical found in a large number of seeds, especially the pits of various fruit. So like apricot pits, avocado pits, I believe, peach pits, I think even cherries. But not the stone. You actually have to open up the stone and pull out the actual seed to get to them.
That's where we went wrong when I tried this, because my roommate wanted to. Because we were Kent Hovind guys back in the day.
So the problem with Laetrile, so the idea behind this Laetrile thing is that Laetrile breaks down into hydrogen cyanide, but only in the presence of certain digestive enzymes. And Laetrile promoters like Kent pretend that only cancer cells have these enzymes. That's not true. Your just general digestive system will break down Laetrile into hydrogen cyanide. And if you eat enough of it, you will have cyanide poisoning. You'll have all the symptoms and signs of cyanide poisoning. And if you eat enough of it, you can die of cyanide poisoning from following Kent Hovind's advice. So the idea that Kent Hovind is against putting toxins in your body to prevent or treat diseases, it might be the most ironic thing I've heard this year. Kent Hovind is a promoter of quack medicine that advocates for you actively eating poison on a daily basis, and more if you are sick. As far as I know, David DB numbers, Kent has never pushed colloidal silver. I would not be surprised to be proved wrong about that, though. But as far as I know, he hasn't. I've never heard of him doing it. I'm taking another drink. I can't with that one. All right, here we go.
The theory is, we'll give you a little dose of poison, you build up an immunity, you know, you get the white blood cell count. I know all that.
No, my goodness. Okay, so basic idea behind vaccines apparently is something we have to talk about. Because apparently, despite the fact that Kent says he knows about germ theory, he doesn't know about this. So, building up an immunity to a toxin is where basically you expose your body to low doses of the toxin for an extended period of time. And so your body starts to make the enzymes that break down that toxin in higher and higher amounts because it's simply used to the presence of the toxin. Now, I'm not recommending this, but it is a thing that happens. For instance, there are people who keep snakes for like making antivenom, and they've been bit, and they've survived because they slowly expose themselves to the venom. That's also how antivenom is made in the first place. Usually horses are injected with small amounts of the venom, and then they start making the enzymes in their blood that helps break down the venom, and then their blood is taken, and those enzymes are extracted. Okay, that's a thing. That's a real thing that happens. I'm not suggesting it for anyone, but it's a thing. Vaccines, on the other hand, use either attenuated viruses, parts of viruses, or in some cases just straight up dead viruses. Or in the case of the new RNA vaccines, they induce your cells to make part of a virus. In the case of the COVID-19 vaccines that are mRNA-based, they induce your cells to make COVID-19 spike proteins. Then your immune cells will recognize these proteins as they're initially exposed to them. And so they will, basically, your immune cells, this is a very high level, oversimplified, but whatever. Basically, you have a type of immune cell that has, they have like almost infinite numbers of various antigens that they can produce. And each little strain is going to produce a particular bit. But the ones that end up actually having an antigen that successfully antagonizes what your body recognizes as a pathogen, those ones are going to be promoted in the lines of future immune cells. So you're going to have a higher response to that, to the antigen. They're making the antibody. Sorry about that, got antibody and antigen mixed up a little bit. So when your body recognizes the antigen that you've been introduced to by a vaccine, you already have a big stockpile of those immune cells that recognize that antigen and produce the correct antibody to antagonize it. That's one of the reasons why boosters are important, because overall, if you're not exposed to the antigen occasionally, then the proportion of your cells that are going to recognize that antigen and produce the correct antibody starts to decline. That's why it's important to get boosters for many vaccines. But these are not the same function. They're similar thematically, but they're not the same thing. Immunity to a toxin and recognizing a pathogen are not the same. They don't use the same mechanisms, they don't use the same cells, not the same thing. You can't just occasionally get a cold and then eventually become immune to colds. You can't even just occasionally, every once in a while, inject yourself with some live wild COVID-19 and just become immune. Now, it is the case that if you have a disease, then a very similar disease will have a lower chance of infecting you. So, I mean, there's something to it, but it's still not the same mechanism. Anyway.
I still remain unconvinced, all right?
Of course you do, Kent.
I think it's a dangerous philosophy to live by.
It's not a philosophy.
Experts who have credibility.
Right? It's... Okay, I guess it is a philosophy to some extent, because what isn't? But, like, among the philosophies, listening to experts and following the evidence and their expert advice is not a dangerous philosophy. It is the least dangerous philosophy. Any philosophy that doesn't have you do that must be more dangerous, because it means you're less likely to be right about medical things, which is dangerous. My goodness.
And I think you should encourage people to not get vaccinated, to at least
take a drink.
Study the truth before they make a decision like that. This lady wrote me a letter and said, Dr. Hovind, we have a son that has been damaged by the MMR vaccine, mumps, measles, rubella.
Okay. Ken says this lady wrote him a letter, but he has a citation of 909shot.com/Anna. So did you pull this off of some BS website, Kent? Or did someone write you a letter, Kent? Because what you have on screen says you pulled it off of a website. I'm going to take a drink for Kent lying for no reason. Just because.
He lost his ability to walk, talk, and feed himself. The government has a fund that compensates for injuries due to vaccines. Our 8-year-old Jock, would you like to have an 8-year-old that can't walk?
I'm just going to say this. That website redirects to some random, like, shady-looking hotel's website.
Ooh.
That then has, maybe it's because I typed, maybe it's not. I don't think it's an ad, though. It's basically saying, like, hey, you should get your vaccinations.
Oh, good.
It talks about that on a hotel's website. None of this makes any sense.
Okay. But here's the thing, Kent. Would I rather have an 8-year-old who can talk and walk than one who can't? Yes. Would I rather have a dead 8-year-old than one who can't walk or talk? No. Because that's the choice that we're basically being presented. Would you, even if it's true that Joshua had this as a result of the vaccine, and by the way, guys, it is the case that there's a special government court system set up for vaccine injuries, and they are extremely generous. They will provide compensation to people who have claimed vaccine injury without them really needing to demonstrate in any scientific way that it was the vaccine that injured them. You're much more likely to win those cases in vaccine courts than you would be in a normal court, because most of these cases would not meet the preponderance of the evidence standard that normal courts need for torts like this. But Kent is presenting us with the idea that, okay, you get a vaccine and have a small chance of your child losing the ability to walk and talk, or you cannot get a vaccine, and according to the statistics, you now have a higher chance of that child dying than of them being in the unfortunate situation of being unable to walk and talk. So even if Kent were right.
Also, you can get a vaccine and then wait for 30 minutes, like I do every time I get my allergy shots, because that's when you're most likely to have a severe reaction to a vaccine.
That's actually
30 minutes.
That's actually why.
And they can do things to help you if you do have one.
Mm-hmm. They can get you adrenaline or epinephrine, depending on what you want to call it. It's the same molecule. They can get you steroids if you need them. Yep. Actually, by the way, that's probably one of the reasons why the over-the-counter medicine that you were taking for your asthma was making your heart race. Most likely that steroid.
Well, instead of albuterol, it was actually epinephrine, which is...
Yeah, well, there you go.
It's adrenaline, that's what it is.
That actually reminds me. Quick anecdote. One day, when I was in the Navy, it snowed a lot, and I couldn't get my car up the hill to go to work on the ship. So I called them and told them this, and I was like, hey, guys, my car will not make it up the hill. Well, you're going to have to walk in. I'm like, well, okay, I'll try. But do you really need me? Because I'm still recovering from, that pneumonia that I spent 3 days in the hospital for, and that they told you I might not make it from.
They did tell me that he might not survive that.
Yeah. They were like, yeah, no, you have to come in. I'm like, okay. So I try to get up the hill. I can't get up except on my hands and knees. So I'm literally crawling up this hill. And then walking about a mile or so through, like 2 feet or so of snow. Is a bit less than 2/3 of a meter of snow. Trudging along. Maybe that's an exaggeration. It's probably closer to a foot. And then finally, I get there. And oh, surprise, surprise, I'm having trouble breathing, so I go to medical. And I spend the entire rest of the day sucking down a mixture of pure oxygen that's had steroids misted into it. And then I went home. Thanks, Navy. It was really vital that I come in that day. Oh, and I got a ride home. But I had them stop before they got to the hill, and then I scooted down the hill on my ass. That was a wonderful day. And by the way, that's not an atypical amount of abuse for the Navy. That's just a particularly interesting story about it. Don't join the U.S. Navy, guys. Here we go.
Talk or feed himself. You know how many parents are in that situation right now? Like
I don't.
tens of thousands of them.
Maybe.
Out of
Now, God,
billions?
Yeah, I mean, giving me a raw number doesn't mean anything to me. Like,
I feel like millions being dead out of billions is worse than tens of thousands
yeah,
that aren't even dead but have suffered. And some of them died, but
God can
he's
use all
talking
that
about
for His
autism
Sorry.
in general, and
I thought you stopped.
it's different. It's all right.
glory. And I know when you have a handicapped child, it brings out the best in the parents. And Dale Evans and Roy Rogers wrote the book, Angels Unaware, about the handicapped child that they had for a while and what good it did for their life. And wonderful things can be done. God can get glory out of anything. But to unnecessarily destroy a child's life, which is what's happening,
No, it's what you're pretending is happening.
is cruel and criminal. Okay? I don't have the documentation on this story. I'm going to tell you this
Shocking.
story, but I'm going to tell you right now, I can't document. I don't remember where I read it.
Ken, if you don't have the documentation, because first of all, you didn't have the documentation for any of these other stories. Because those weren't real
Lies.
documentations. Those are just claimed on some website that you lied about how you got them.
They're documented on his PowerPoint.
Yeah, great. So, Ken, if this is even bad documentation by your standards, you just shouldn't be selling it. I'm going to stick in and take a drink. I'm actually going to finish this little bit of drink here. I'm going to pour myself a new drink real quick because I have a bottle right here. Clink.
Nice.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, whenever Kent admits to having insufficient sources, what's more than a red flag? Is it like an infrared flag? Because it's even
Red
more
flags.
red than red. It's two
A
red
red
flags.
flag made out of Kent's red shirt.
Oh, good one. Yeah, the idea of Kent feeling like something is undersourced is quite the thing. Because I'll remind you, this is the man whose dissertation contains the citation, KJV get title. So,
Which I don't even. What is that? How?
what it means is that he was referencing the King James Version of the Bible, but he didn't know which book he was referencing. So he left that in there for
Okay.
himself as a note, and he never corrected that.
So which book of the Bible? Okay, I didn't know what he meant by get title.
Because the actual quote is KJV get book title, but that's less catchy, so I don't say it.
Well, he put it in several times and slightly different, couple times in his dissertation.
Yeah.
I read a lot, and I've studied a lot, and I didn't write it down. One of those things like, oh, that's a great idea, and I missed it. But there was a group of doctors meeting just in the last few years, if I recall the details, and they were getting up testifying about the dangers of vaccinations. Don't vaccinate your kids. This is dangerous. Kids are dying. What are we doing? Why are we vaccinating kids? After
I can
these
think of a good reason why.
What is that reason?
Attempts to eradicate horrible disease for the benefit of all humankind.
Weird. Also, Evidence and Reasons just said, my sister cooked up bourbon balls with real bourbon for me. I'm going to dip them in some rum and eat them. That's sort of a drink. Oh my goodness. I'm extremely jealous.
Yeah, me too.
Can you put me in touch with your sister so I can get some bourbon balls? I'm kidding. Although I'm sure that Sal's sister is every bit as lovely as Sal, which is saying something. That's quite considerable because
Lovely.
Sal's a stand-up guy. Look, there's some really great young Earth creationists in terms of just like being good people out there, and not many of them are on YouTube. But Sal and Paleologos, who are both in the chat, are two of them. So they both deserve your subscription if you're interested in some young Earth creationist content that isn't made by absolute scumbags, but instead is made by pretty cool people.
doctors talked about all the horrible things happening with vaccinations, several, I think 2 or 3 doctors got up in a row who were pediatricians.
Oh.
They said before this group of doctors that were considering, voting on writing a recommendation saying, look, we recommend you not vaccinate your kids.
Who are they writing this recommendation to? Where is this? What is the group of doctors? Is there an organization? Kent doesn't know because he can't document this story.
I could see someone saying, "Hey, your twin daughters had a severe allergic reaction. You shouldn't vaccinate them anymore,"
Oh yeah, that'd be
or something like that. But yeah, no, I don't think that's what he's talking about.
probably not.
That's what they were considering doing. These pediatricians got up and said 80% of our business, of our income, is from vaccines.
That's extremely unlikely. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but look, I remember what I went to the pediatrician for as a kid, and it was mostly stuff like ear infections and stuff like that. What were you going to say, Ben? Sorry.
There are specialties in medicine, like what I did. Most of the work I did would be like screening pap smears. Okay, so what?
That means big cancer is just
That means
giving everyone cancer.
No, it's just someone has to do it, and why pay a pathologist way too much money to do that when you could pay a technologist less money to do that?
Yeah. Well, and
because the pathologists are too busy doing harder work.
Yeah, and that's
that the technologists can't do.
And that's a good point. Is like, who's the people who are most likely to give kids vaccines? Was it pediatricians? You mean pediatricians are giving a lot of vaccines? Oh my goodness! Shock, horror. It's like, hey,
who else would do it?
How come ENT doctors are spending so much time helping people with their ear, nose, and throat? I don't know. Weird. Sounds suspicious to me. Man, next thing you know, dermatologists are going to get most of their money from us giving people various topical dermatology type creams. Probably big dermatology.
That and skin cancer diagnoses, but
well, okay.
And other things, but.
If you make this recommendation, you're going to put every pediatrician out of business.
That's not true. Kids get sick. Kids get injured. Kids need physicals.
So guess what? They didn't vote to recommend against vaccines.
I don't think this story ever happened. I'm taking a drink for stories that didn't happen.
Because, nobody eats their own. The doctor's got to take care of it. After all, Mercedes are expensive, It takes a lot of income.
Doctors do get vaccines, though, so I don't know what he meant by that.
Yeah, that is a weird thing. Doctors tend to have a pretty high vaccination rate. Odd that.
Any doctors in the chat, do you get vaccinated or not?
Or more specifically, if you're a doctor with children, did your kids get vaccinated?
Oh, that's even better.
Mm-hmm. To pay for one of them things every month, so.
Oh. Lloydie for 200 yen says, phrasing, don't ask for sister's balls. You know what? I specified bourbon balls, my friend.
It goes right back to 1 Timothy. The love of money is the root of what? All evil.
Kent is a literalist, so what he must think is that Satan loves money, and that so did Adam and Eve. Which I don't think he does think, because there was no such thing as money. No one had invented it yet. So, I'm just going to take a drink for Kent not realizing how this claim contradicts his whole thing about biblical literalism.
So if any medical doctors are watching this tape and you're recommending this, you better study what you're doing. People are trusting you for advice.
Imagine Kent
Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Doctors to study.
I don't know if people are aware of this or not, but you have to study a lot to become a medical doctor unless you just magically know everything.
Wait, you don't just walk into a hospital and get a rubber stamp and now you're a doctor?
Maybe if you have that eidetic memory, you don't actually have to study. You just have to learn once and then you'll remember forever.
By the way, I'm taking a drink for Kent Hovind telling doctors that maybe they should study medicine more because he knows more than they do.
Do you think doctors have ever considered that they should study medicine?
No, they've never. That's impossible.
So, having worked with pathologists a lot, they study medicine actively.
You don't say. My goodness.
They're writing papers and doing their cases and all that. They're working. It's crazy.
By the way, Paleologos, who's another stand-up young Earth creationist, just said, yes, and Johansson found Lucy towards the end of the field season because he needed the funding money, which is another thing Kent Hovind likes to say. Yeah, obviously. It was just a sham to get more funding money. Oh, Kent.
And if you're recommending kids get vaccinated and then they get an autoimmune disease, and many do, and I'm sure you're going to have a cover story of why it happened.
Could it possibly be that a non-zero percentage of kids are going to get autoimmune diseases regardless of the vaccination, and that there's no correlation between new vaccines being introduced and the amount of autoimmune diseases?
My cover story is correlation does not equal causation.
Seriously.
That's my cover story. I'm sure there was a winter, spring, summer, and fall that year too.
It is just as stupid as saying every car accident, every fatality in a car that results within 24 hours of one of the fatalities being vaccinated was caused by the vaccine. There's no reason to link autoimmune diseases to vaccines. There's no evidence for it. But yeah, I'm sure some people develop autoimmune diseases not long after getting vaccinated, because a lot of people get vaccinated, and some non-zero number of those people are going to develop autoimmune diseases. Just like some non-zero number of those people are going to have heart attacks, or are going to die in a car accident, or are going to get stepped on by an elephant. I don't know. I'm sure someone out there has been stepped on by an elephant and died within like 24 hours of getting a vaccine.
Especially if one grows to be the size of Texas. Takes one step. Oh, man.
Carrie Bronson for $2 says, kids who grow into adults need more medical care. That's true. Yeah. I mean, if you kill off your patients, that's a really bad business strategy for a pharmaceutical company. It's a really, really bad business model. Because the thing is, Kent's like, oh, the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay, so you think you're going to get more money out of dead patients or live patients, Kent? I'm going to go with live.
Good point.
Oh, it must have got it somewhere else. It wasn't me. Then they're sure going to be a cover story. Okay, they always have that. Okay, but for the next 70 years, as that mother has to feed and change diapers on her baby, you think about it.
Isn't it normal to have to feed and change diapers on your baby?
Is he saying that she'll have to do that for 70 years?
Oh, maybe he did.
Is that what he's trying to say?
Yeah, I think he's probably saying something like that.
You got your $40 or $80 or whatever it was, and they're paying for it for the rest of their life.
I mean, prove it, Kent. Just demonstrate it. You can't. You haven't. No one has.
Think about that long and hard. This goes on to the story here. This lady writes, she says, this business of shots for tots is aimed at seeing to it that children under 2 are fully vaccinated by their doctor's offices. You would not believe what's going on in this area. After studying this for the last...
You would believe it?
I would believe, because I remember getting a bunch of vaccines.
I would also believe it.
And I remember I had to do this, and then they would stab me with a sharp needle, and I would cry, and then they'd say, you're brave, and then that would be the end of it.
Wait, you didn't get a lollipop at the end?
I don't remember.
I
just remember thinking, I'm not brave, I'm crying.
Well,
that's how I remember.
But you weren't crying even more. We're brave.
It didn't matter to me. I just didn't want them to stick me with needles. I was 2 or under at the time.
Yeah, it is
or
pretty
under
unpleasant.
2 at the time.
4 years, Satan is seeing to it that well-meaning parents are destroying their baby's immune system.
So hold on, is Satan whispering to doctors? Are doctors Satan possessed?
I want to see the study that has Satan in it.
Right? I want Kent to start being specific. When he says Satan is doing something, how? Is he possessing doctors?
And it says after studying this for 4 years, and then Satan something, whatever, right?
Yeah, but I want to know...
let's see that study.
Yeah.
Come on.
I want to know what the mechanism by which Satan deceives doctors. Like, when you get your doctorate, do they lead you into another secret room and then you get, like, demon-possessed or something? Like, how does that work, Kent? Tell me.
By putting over 22 viruses into their system before...
No. Not all vaccines contain a whole virus. Many of them contain viral elements. Many of them contain viruses that no longer are infectious. Some of them do contain attenuated viruses. For instance, when I got the smallpox vaccine, that was an attenuated virus, and in fact, I could have spread it to other parts of my body if I wasn't careful with hygiene. Turns out I was, so I didn't have that unfortunate circumstance, but it was a realistic possibility. But most vaccines aren't like that.
Or they are too. 909shot.com has story after story after story of people destroyed by vaccines.
Kent, you know what the plural of anecdote isn't? Evidence. No number of anecdotes on a website constitutes evidence of the dangers of vaccines. And take a drink for Kent not knowing the first thing about evidence.
Now, Satan's goal is to reduce the population of the earth.
Well, that's where we're going to stop it, because he's
Why?
doing a really bad idea.
Why?
Yeah, that's a good question. Doesn't Satan want as many people to go to hell with him as possible? Isn't that supposed to be his goal?
That makes more sense to me. I thought his initial goal was to be God.
Yeah, who does he want to
Or
be
take
God over?
over
No
for
one
God.
or a bunch of people?
Like if God retires or something, but God, he's eternal.
Yeah, the idea that Satan just wants to kill a bunch of people makes no sense from basically any standpoint where you get Satan's motivations from, like,
It's not even that.
a religious
It's keep
standpoint.
it's keep the global population lower.
But
It's like, why?
Yeah. What is that? How does that help Satan? I don't know. So let's see. Silver Heartless says, I thought the tetanus shot most people get if they step on a rusty nail as a vaccine. How wrong am I? So if I remember correctly, tetanus is a bacterium, and I don't actually know the exact details of the tetanus shot. So consult your physician, Silver Harlow, because like I said, I don't want to lie to you about this. Is basically what it comes down to. I don't know enough about tetanus or the shot. But Bent, you got anything coming up you want to talk about?
Why?
I don't know.
I think so.
Okay. I'm going to open up a calendar so I can see what's coming up. Let's see. Okay, so on the 7th, it's already scheduled. The next episode of Dapper Goes to Church show is there. That is where I'm taking a look at Pastor Carl Kirby's sermon about fossils, because why would you give a sermon about fossils? That makes total sense, right? And let's see, that's episode 2 of 3, if I remember correctly. Then on Saturday, I should be doing another episode of Giants of North America. I don't know what language it will be the title will be translated into. We've already done Spanish, French, and Romanian. Maybe I'll pick another maybe I'll pick unobscure Romance language, or I'll just go with one of the more mainstream ones like Portuguese or Italian or something. You know what? Hey, put it in the comments. If you have a Romance language that you would like it to be translated into, let me know, especially if it's one of the less well-known ones like Romanche or Languedoc or Catalan or something like that, right? You know, one of the ones that isn't named after a currently existing state. Let's see. Then, Tuesday, the 12th, should be Eric with Erica. I'm going to double check with Gutsa Gibbon, make sure she's okay with that. She usually is, so I'm not expecting that to change, but you never know. Things come up sometimes. If it's not Eric with Erica, I'm not sure what it will be, but there will be something at this time slot on the 12th. Thursday, the 14th, should be Wednesday, the 13th, should be the next episode of Guns, Magic, and Steel on Cheshire Vic's channel. Me, Maddie, Benthoven, Gutsa Gibbon, her fiance, TD Lane, Cheshire Vic, all playing Dungeons & Dragons together. Then the next big thing is on the 20th. I'm going to be starting my live stream RPG. It's going to be Power Rangers RPG as requested by TD Lane. So TD Lane will be there. Maddie's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Some people you don't know are going to be there. And then eventually, we might have another person join. Possibly. We've got some music by Benthoven, who's generously provided some music. Art by me. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think. So hang out on that. That's going to be on Top Hats Off. That's my off-topic channel. Go subscribe over there if you want to. If you don't, don't. But that's all I have in terms of looking ahead for now. I should be starting a new series on Jackson Wheat's channel, but I don't know exactly when that's going to air. So, you know. Avishanti says Basque. I'm going to stick with Romance languages for now. For now. Eventually, when we run out of Romance languages, we can switch it up. Maybe we can do Basque after that. But yeah, I think that's it, guys. Thank you very much, everyone. Again, there is a Patreon drive if you are able to. And if you're not, please don't. Just liking and subscribing is always fine. And we're going to give you the end credits, which, here you go.
I just want to take a moment to thank all my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Chris Love, Landon Knoll, Sphincter of Doom, Star Runner, and Patrick Dennis. It's because of my channel members and patrons that this channel can keep on going at the blistering pace of 2 to 3 and almost always 3 uploads per week. And because I do run this channel at a slight loss, it is very important that anyone who can afford to and really likes my content, please do consider joining the Patreon or joining the channel with the link below. Patreon link is in the description. On Patreon, you can join at a 10% discount if you join for an annual subscription. And if for some reason you can't afford it, or an annual or monthly pledge isn't for you, there are always other ways to help out the channel. There's an Amazon wishlist linked in the description. There's also a merch store full of almost everything that Teespring makes. Heck, you can get my face on a onesie. And of course, if monetary support isn't something you can do, please just like and share this video and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget, if you're subscribed, turn on that notification bell.